A D N.
It's HeadphonesNeil!
What's up, guys? Welcome back to HeadphonesNeil Reviews and the final episode of 2024. So, got a pretty packed episode for everyone for this week, so I'll jump right into it. But overall, got my Dune Prophecy Season 1 review for you guys, a Star Wars review, and a few other items. So, with that being said, jumping into the Dune Prophecy Season 1 review, overall, it ended on a decent note. Not great, not terrible. It has a lot of intricacies, drama. It's a very dry show, but if you've ever read the books, it is a very slow burn. You have a lot of conversations, especially in the original novel, of people's conversations in their heads and things like that. So the show did a good job of translating that. Otherwise, though, the season, while not explicitly doing this, did a good job of conveying that the rise of the Bene Gesserit, but also that their prophecies are hard to read. And while they do have the guy who plays Ragnar in the main role of causing the revolution or evolution that they want to bring in the Imperium, it did a lot of interesting foreshadowing with what the Dune original Dune story is all about with Paul Atreides. So that it feels like the show had a lot of those parallels with the eyes and the powers that Ragnar has. And I know I keep calling him Ragnar even though that's not his name in this show, but they did a lot of interesting parallels there. A lot of the drama in the story arcs, the re-rise of the Harkonnens via the Bene Gesserit lady and all of that stuff. So generally speaking, overall a good show for me. Wasn't terrible, and this is especially on the news that we're going to get a second season. So overall for me, if you liked the Dune films, especially the latest two films by Denis Villeneuve, then you'll probably like this as well. If you didn't like the films, then you may not like it, or if you didn't like the novels to begin with, it may not be up your alley. So it is a very interesting line there. I know for me it's kind of in the middle because they're such slow burns, but they do spend a lot of time on world and universe building, storytelling, individual interactions, and that sort of stuff. So with that being said, for me, I'd give it a grade of about a B to A minus. It wasn't terrible. I mean, I don't know what would have made it any better. Probably the only thing that may have made it better, I mean, I don't know. Like for me, it's not, and it wasn't. They didn't really not do anything as far as the expectations. It was the formation and the rise of the Bene Gesserit. So we see a lot of their power rising, their vie for power, putting someone that they're familiar with on the throne, a lot of their internal struggles and strife, the starting of their voice that they speak with, and all of that. So for me, it generally just worked. There were a couple of episodes in there that kind of, I think it was like the second and third, that were kind of a stretch and extension on the first episode, but they rounded it out nicely in the last three. So not overtly terrible. So that's probably the only reason I would take away points, but they rounded out the season nicely, and it wasn't rushed in my opinion to me. So that's why I give it more points than not. So, and they didn't drag it along unnecessarily. Like they didn't make a 6-episode show like 10 or 12 episodes. So they definitely didn't drag it on or anything like that. So that's definite plus for me. So that's really all I gotta say for that. So in summary, overall B to A minus grade. If you like the Dune movies and or the novels, you'll like this show. If you didn't, then you won't like this show as much. But it's a good starting off point if you want kind of a prequel and then jumping into the films. So with that, let's jump right into the biggest review for this episode in the form of my annual watch through of the Star Wars saga. I know it's technically the Skywalker saga, but for me, a more complete story in the film universe is or does include Solo and Rogue One. So for this particular watch through, I did watch it in chronological order rather than release order. So it was the prequel trilogy, Solo, Rogue One, original trilogy, and then the sequels. Because that's the story A to Z as far as I'm concerned. And for a proper watch through as far as continuity and stories and all that, it does make better sense to watch it that way. I know there's certain cuts that want you to stop at certain points of each film, go watch another film, cut back, go watch other films and things like that, but to me that gets a little bit more. I've tried that a couple of times. It's kind of convoluted, so for me I stick to the actual story order rather than the flashbacks so that it all stays together. But with that being said, overall for me, I still enjoy all the films in this order because it does tell the story from the rise or the birth, or not really the birth, but the rise of Anakin into Darth Vader, the rise of the Empire, the Emperor's power, the continuity of that the Emperor doesn't have absolute control over the Empire, but then the repercussions of building that Empire, and then the downfall of the Empire, and then also the consequences for Anakin's actions for falling to the dark side, which don't necessarily pay off on a galactic scale in the original trilogy, but it does pay off in the sequel trilogy because the originals is more of while the prequels I'll start with is the rise of the Empire, the original trilogy is the rebellion era. The sequels is more of the finalizing the fallout and completing the undoing of what the Emperor started, even though it doesn't necessarily deal with rebuilding the galaxy because now they have to do it again, even though the Empire was toppled in the original trilogy. It was still dealing with the repercussions of the Emperor's actions from the Clone Wars as well, so it was a lot to undo. But the only thing that kind of stood out as kind of weird watching it this time is all the shock and surprise that everyone felt that the Emperor had returned, even though they kind of explain it away as, well, he was really interested in cloning and that was a big thing for him, so it's not a real surprise that he returned. It's one of those things that could have been better explained or told or something along those lines, mostly because for me it felt a lot along the lines of they were trying to bring, the Force Unleashed into a more cinematic universe, or bring that idea and concept into the Skywalker saga. So I still kind of, not totally, but I still kind of hold to the fact that, or the idea that one director for the entire trilogy, whether it was J.J. Abrams or I think the Last Jedi director was Rian Johnson, but don't quote me on that. But if it was one director for the entire trilogy, I think it could have had a more comprehensive storyline, or they should have gone the route of 3 individual directors for each film and have them build upon the prior one and take it from there, just so that you can have that unique storytelling. So for the storytelling aspect, I think 3 individual directors would have worked, but for continuity, I think one director for all 3 would have worked better. And in this case, because J.J. Abrams was the director for the first and third ones, I think having him for all 3 of them would have worked better. And the whole idea of the Emperor returning would have been fine. The cloning idea and aspect could have been hashed out a little bit more, rather than as a prefix to the third film. And they could have better spend more time working on the Snoke angle, more time with Luke Skywalker and Rey's training, spend more time with maybe even with explaining the Knights of Ren and Luke's Academy, and even had the opportunity to spend more time with all of that stuff and do a flashback and spend some time with the training and all that. So, but that's more of just a personal opinion of all of that. That doesn't take away from the continuity that the sequels all spends a lot of time, as far as themes go, dealing with the repercussions of what the Emperor did in the prequel trilogy. And that's kind of what it feels like in retrospect now, what Luke was trying to tell Rey, that even though he did bring Darth Vader back and he saw the darkness that was in Ben Solo, it was also the Jedi who allowed for themselves to be deceived by Palpatine, allowed him to play mind games with Anakin and deceive him, and create the clone army, start the Clone Wars, have this galactic-wide conflict, and create the Empire, and all that to show that the Jedi are not perfect. They allowed all of this to happen, and ultimately a good Jedi can become a legend, which happened to him as well. He's not infallible. So on a galactic scale, that's the macro view of that. On the micro level, is one of those things that Luke, it didn't come across well as far as on-screen presentation, but I think what they were trying to also do was show that on a micro level, the Jedi are not perfect individuals, and for the Skywalker family, and for Anakin and Luke in particular, they were susceptible to their fears, and it was easy for them to, see the darkness in others. Whereas, for example, and this kind of becomes a gender thing, but it's not a gender conflict. It's more of one of the things that they present pretty decently, I guess, but could have been done better, was to show that actually it was the women in the Skywalker family who were the strong ones, and that starts from Padme and it goes down into Leia, and it also goes into Rey, because even though she was the daughter of Palpatine, she resisted the darkness. She pulled back. She even in The Force Awakens, she didn't want to take Luke's lightsaber from Maz. So she inherently saw the evil, or not inherently, but she instinctively pulled away from the darkness. She sensed it even though she didn't understand it, and she didn't want anything to do with it. So ultimately she was the stronger for it, because while the men fell prey to their fear and their anger, the women in general have not. So that's one of those things where, yes, I can see how it was not generally presented well, or not necessarily presented perfectly, but the ideas and elements were there. So it's something now that I'm able to see very well and very easily, or much more easily, by watching them in chronological order. So for me, it was still a fun time as always. So I definitely recommend rewatching the entire film saga in this order, just to get that story. And then you can always go back, and if time permitting, you can watch the Clone Wars to fill in all the blanks during that era. You can watch the Kenobi series, and Kenobi, you can watch all of that, as far as more stuff during the original trilogy era. The Mandalorian fills in a little bit more after the original trilogy. So all of the TV show stuff is good stuff to fill in the blanks during various eras. But the films themselves present a good overarching story for a multitude of themes, which we can now see by watching all 11 films in chronological order. And then also, as far as the stories go, Rogue One still holds up as the better film, because it hits all the spots as far as the Rebels, or basically has that premise that you want the Rebels to steal the Death Star plans, and they strike from a hidden base, so they hit those very well. While I wasn't expecting necessarily to see Tarkin, Vader, or Leia in it, Tarkin and Vader were actually the two good elements of the film. For me, Leia still doesn't hold up, because if you go straight from Rogue One into A New Hope, while I'll let the visual quality go, because you're talking about 30 or 40 years between the two, but when you look at Leia in A New Hope, and then you move into or you see her in Rogue One, and then you move into A New Hope, you can tell that it's a lot of it's either a CG effect of the body double is different. It's a totally different. It feels like a totally different person. So the CG or the application of Leia in Rogue One still doesn't work for me. I know, or I kind of remember a lot of people not liking Tarkin, but in the case of Rogue One to A New Hope, it generally actually still works for me. I probably don't have as critical of an eye in this case, but if I can see it in Leia, I'm kind of applying the same thing to Tarkin. But so that's why for me, Tarkin holds up, Leia does not. So that kind of takes me out of it, but not to the point where I dislike the film. The concept and idea there were good to explain how she got the Death Star plans. As far as Solo goes, there were a few more points to hit because you need Han and Chewie to team up. You need to Han and Lando to meet, find out what causes their conflict, and then we need to know how Han gets the bounty on his head with Jabba the Hutt. So that whole story arc, as far as starting to work for Jabba, losing his shipment, and getting the bounty on his head, and then also lastly the Kessel Run. So they nailed 3 of the points, so that you have Han meeting Chewie, you have Han and Lando's conflict, and getting the Millennium Falcon, and then making the Kessel Run. So I guess they made 4 points, because Han also gets the Millennium Falcon. But the big thing for me that they didn't hit was Han and Jabba the Hutt. They basically did a name drop, and then you have a whole side quest with Crimson Dawn. So for me, that's kind of what takes away from it. So I guess 80% is good for the movie. So I'm saying, I guess now, where originally I really didn't like it that they didn't have Jabba the Hutt in the film. I'm kind of walking it back, because now thinking about it in retrospect, they did a passable job in all of the story, but they didn't hit the biggest points. So even though it's on a point by point basis is about 80%, I'm deducting 5%. Just because the one thing, or one of the big things that Han is known for, is not even in the movie. So what was the point of doing this if the one of the big things you know Han for is not there? So for me, the whole Crimson Dawn thing should have been swapped with the Jabba the Hutt stuff. So instead of Woody Harrelson's character working for Beckett, or even he could have still been working for Beckett, but they could have done that job, and then they could have gone to Jabba to say, hey, we need to steal some spice to pay this guy back, but we need the job. Do it for Jabba for, pro bono or whatever, owe Jabba, and then, make that second run to pay off Jabba. And that's where Han has to drop the cargo, and that's how he gets the bounty on his head, because he failed Jabba. And he's like, well, he gets that reputation for making the Kessel Run, doing the initial job to begin with, and all of that. Like, they could have done all of that and introduced Jabba, and not had all the side stuff with Crimson Dawn, having Darth Maul in there for some reason, and then not even having Jabba, just doing a name drop of Jabba the Hutt. So for me, originally I was harsh on the film, but now I'm walking it back a little bit and saying that it's not a terrible film, but it's not as good as Rogue One because it doesn't hit the points that they needed to hit. If they had Jabba the Hutt in the film, for me, I could have let a lot of, not that that there was a lot of stuff to let go, because a lot of stuff they did well, but the thing that they didn't have in the film was the one thing that stands out that they should have had in the film. So that's kind of what does it for me, that they need to, that's why they gets extra points off for not being as good of a film as it could have been. And part of it too, to take it outside of the film, it did have a lot of production issues, story writing issues, and all of that stuff. So I think part of that also contributes to it. But that being said, like I said, going back to my original point, watch the films in chronological or story order, and it'll make for a good set of Star Wars movies. So with that being said, we'll move on into the remaining items for this review. So I had a chance to listen to Snoop Dogg's latest album, Missionary. So since it was releasing, I had a chance to go back and listen to Doggy Style, his debut album, and that not only does that album stand up, this album stands out as a good continuation of Doggy Style in that while it doesn't have the same kind of like the same number of hits that the original as Doggy Style had, Missionary kind of takes it to, or it moves from the gangster rap lifestyle into more of the, I'm gonna call it G-funk or gangster funk, because it's more upbeat, more of a celebration, more of like an exciting promotional kind of thing. So I've only had a chance to listen to it a couple of times as of this recording, but as far as notable tracks go, I do like Thank You, Another Part of Me, and what was it? What's that one? Another Part of Me. So overall a decent record. A lot of it was produced by Dre, so you have a couple of tracks with him on it. You have Eminem, Exhibit, Method Man, and a few other people, but I'm gonna listen to it a few more times no matter what. It's still a good album. It's still a good exciting, entertaining, lively album, but I want to listen to it a couple more times just because the overall feeling I get from the album is that between that, Ice Cube releasing an album and Eminem having an album all in one calendar year, is that they're gearing up for Dre to either have another album or somehow in 2025 have a new NWA album come out. So it's not going to necessarily stand for the same thing as the original group, but because you still have Dre, Cube, MC Ren, and I think DJ Yella are still around. So I think Eazy is really the only one who's not around, but they could theoretically do a comeback to bring Eminem and Snoop Dogg into the group, still put it under the NWA name, and I guess and release something with the group as a whole. So between that or Dre putting out a new album and theoretically even calling it something like Aftermath, and having and using that as the causeway to bring the group back together in some form in 2025 or in the future. For me, that's kind of my theory going into 2025, is the reason we have these three albums coming out all around the same time in one calendar year is to kind of get everyone ready for a new Dre or NWA album. So with that being said, I do recommend, if you're a fan of Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, gangster rap, 90s, 80s and 90s hip hop, then definitely check it out. It's a very enjoyable album. A very good subtle reference to bringing across multiple eras of rap into one album. So you have a lot of throwbacks to prior Snoop Dogg and Dre and NWA tracks, rock tracks like Another One by Sid Dust, Another Brick in the Wall, and things like that. So overall, very nicely done in a very Snoop Dogg fashion. So I definitely recommend giving it a listen. Otherwise, I also had a chance to visit Knott's Berry Farm for potentially the last time of 2024. I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to go before the end of the year one more time, but I did have a chance to check out some of the extra Merry Farm decorations, the Christmas decorations that they put up. So the big stage next to the Calico train has been decorated with some snow and a bridge, a barn, and all of that's for the evening performances. They have Christmas carolers outside of the saloon. The piano man is playing Christmas tunes. They have more stalls with Christmas wares and things like that throughout Ghost Town. So all of that's good to go. All the rest of the decorations are also up around the park. So you have poinsettias and ribbons and lights and all of that sort of stuff. So if you haven't gone, and there's still time to check it out. So if you haven't gone, I definitely recommend going to check it out. During the day is kind of okay, but I do recommend going in the evening. It will get a little bit busier But if you're going just to walk around, check out the lights and the atmosphere and the stalls and things like that, it is a very, very fun and festive atmosphere. So definitely worth checking out. So I recommend going. There's still a little bit of time to check it out, so now is the time. But if not, there's always next year, and you can use this as a recommendation that, much like the other themed events during the year, Knott's Merry Farm is up there as far as on par with things like Knott's Spooky Farm as far as the Halloween stuff. They don't really do too much for Thanksgiving, I think, but they get in for their various, and then I think they also have like a peanut celebration, so they have more stuff around that for earlier in the year, and then summertime activities and all of that different stuff. So Merry Farm is also another good time to check out the park for their Christmas time activities and decorations and all of that good stuff. Now, as far as the gameplay, I did have a chance to finish playing Monument Valley 3. It does require a Netflix subscription, so if you play the first two, that's going to be probably the most jarring change from those two, is that you do need to have a Netflix subscription in order to play the game and sign in and all of that stuff. So that's just a heads up there. But other than that, if you play the first two, you're pretty much going to get a similar experience in this game. There's all the similar kind of puzzles and traversals and things like that. The big notable change from the first two games is you can now navigate a boat on water. So it does have on-screen controls, which are not terrible. It does take a little bit of getting used to navigate around, but it's not terribly done. So it's pretty easy to get to, pretty easy to access and navigate. And once you get used to it and how the bricks flow in the water, then you should be okay as far as being able to do all those navigations. So once you do that, then otherwise the game is pretty straightforward. For the most part, it's the same until the last few levels, when you get one level, I think it's around level 7 or 8, where you get a different color scheme, and then episode 9, I think you're in some fields and things like that. And the final level, level 10, is probably the big puzzle, which is not terribly different. So if you're expecting something big and grand and much more different than the first two, you're not going to get too much different. The main difference is the story and different puzzles to navigate through, so it's not like it's the exact same levels. So part of that probably is just that now that you know what to expect in the game, it's not going to seem that too drastically different. So that's why the water levels were particularly nicely done. And a nice change from the first two games. If they didn't have them, then I would probably rank it lower than about a B+ or an A-, but I rank it pretty highly because it's still a good game. It continues the story. You still have some nice levels to navigate through and complete and figure out and all of that stuff. So overall, I do recommend playing it, especially if you've played the first two. You don't necessarily have to have played the first two, because the story is not a big integral part of it, but I mean, it does kind of help understand the themes of it. But you don't have to have played the first two in order to play the third one. But if you play them, then when you get into the third one, then you should be able to get through it pretty easily. So with that being said, the link to the long play of the game is in the show notes, which is also up on the YouTube channel. So if you want to level by level playthrough, then you can check that out on the YouTube as well. Or if you just want one long video for the entire game, then that's also available up on the YouTube channel. On a related note, I am still playing Real Coaster, so not much to say there. I play through the levels. I'm putting them up. I'm currently on the moon base level, which is a pretty cool level. You get some nice ground level views of space and Earth and things like that, so it looks pretty cool. So overall, a pretty nicely designed level, and that one's kind of enjoyable, so there's that. Otherwise, as far as upcoming gameplays, I was going to start the year with Knights of the Old Republic, but I was looking at the Netflix games library and I saw that GTA San Andreas was available. And it is available for Android. Well, I mean, much like you would expect it to be. So I got to thinking that since I still have my Netflix subscription active, I thought I would give the game a try. I did see that it's rated like 3.6 stars or something on the Google Play Store. So I was looking at the comments as to why that could be. And it seems like a few people get stuck in a particular part of the game where like their car gets stuck or they get a glitch in a certain part of the game. They're unable to get out of that glitch and continue to play. So I don't know if that was before the latest update or after the update, or it was just, maybe it was just their device, maybe it was a game, I don't know. I still have to look into that. But I got to thinking that since the game seems to look visually nice, I've never actually played a full GTA game, that I would give it a shot and see how it goes, or play it through as far as I can. If I finish the game, then great. If I don't finish the game, then that's okay too. It does look like it has controller support, so I will give it a shot with my Razer Kishi. And I'll at least start playing it, see how far I can get, see if it holds my interest, see how the controls hold up. If it works out well enough, then I'll keep playing it until I either hit that glitch that I read about or I finish the game. And if it doesn't hold my interest, then I'll kind of let it fall off and I'll stop playing, and I'll do my review as far as I get, and I'll put out the review on the podcast as well and say that, well, I've played as far as I can. It just doesn't interest me, or the controls are kludgy, or it's not, kind of the kind of game I'm that's holding my interest, whatever the reason. I mean, whatever, if I finish it, then I'll review it based on that. If I don't, I'll review it based on that as well. So, there's that. So once I finish that, then my next gameplay after that will be, Knights of the Old Republic. And in the middle, if I find a good Dune mod to play, then I'll play that. But I do have to start looking into seeing what new ones are out there. But I think I've had a good number of months playing a bunch of Dune mods, so I'm currently planning on taking a break from those to play GTA and Knights of the Old Republic. But that's all there is for that. So that is actually all there is for this particular episode. So as far as the Knott stuff for 2025, I do plan on continuing to do those reviews. I haven't decided what my reviews are going to be for 2025 yet. I think last year I did mention something about doing more of like the history or like a ride related monthly review, maybe like doing one ride each month, or maybe like a history through the park or something like that, where each month I do maybe a different era, or pick whatever date whenever the park opened, and do certain eras between the park opening through 2025 or something like that. But I haven't quite finalized that, so I was thinking about starting with maybe doing a monthly history of a ride, or a section by section thing or something like that, or history of the rides or like the rides that were available at Knott's, or that have been at Knott's are no longer there, and then current rides that are at the park later in the year or something like that. And then something else that's coming in the pipelines as well is something I've been meaning to do, which I think I was going to start this year as well, which didn't actually pan out, was a beginner's guide to custom live wallpaper maker, the Android app that lets you create your own live wallpaper for Android. So I know I put a few of them out there as screenshots and previews and things like that of the ones I've created. So I got to thinking that, well, how can I help show people how to create their own custom live wallpapers? I know a lot of it was me doing it personally on my own, doing a lot of Google searches and reading forums and Reddit, watching YouTube videos and things like that. So I got to thinking that I'll create my own YouTube series for beginners, because it's not going to be anything fancy. I don't know a lot of the embedded and hidden formulas and animations and all that. This is just basic everyday stuff that anybody can create, but just create a video series to introduce people on setting up the app, using the various elements and creating a home screen that you can get up and running in. I mean, technically it can be done in as little as a day, and then you can tweak it from there. But, you know, if you have a weekend or something and you want to spend time, you know, and even sometime in the evenings just setting up a home screen, then that's kind of what I'm aiming for that to be. So look out for that coming in 2025. As soon as I start working on that, I'll start uploading the videos, and I'll have a playlist up to have that ongoing playlist of reviews. I don't know if I'm going to do that weekly, monthly, just periodically as I have them or anything like that. But regardless of how often I do it, I'm going to create, you know, individual videos based on what I want to do. So, you know, an introductory video on setting up the app, and then various basic elements on how to do them, what you can do in those elements, and things like that, and then take it from there and then have it culminate into creating a home screen that combines the features of all those different things that I review, so that you can see all those things that I taught implemented into a cohesive home screen. So that's all there is for that. So I know this episode was a little bit longer than usual, but I did want to get through a lot of different things and cover a lot of different topics for the last episode of the year. So with that, that's all there is for this particular episode. Thanks for supporting the show, subscribing, listening, following on YouTube, all of that usual stuff. I hope everyone has a happy holidays. So as you can tell from the title of the episode, this is the last one for 2024, so I will be resuming in 2025 with the podcast. As far as gameplays go, once I start GTA, I'll start putting those up, so it's not going to be completely shut down as far as content, but as far as podcasts go, the next one will be in 2025. But as I said, thanks for subscribing to the show, tuning in, listening, however you listen, whether it's through the website at HeadphonesNeil.reviews, subscribing in your podcast client of choice, on YouTube at youtube.com/PatelN01, which also has all the gameplay videos, regular YouTube shorts that I've done a lot more with. So if you haven't checked those out, then definitely look at those as far as the ones I create for gameplay shorts and various other stuff. And then of course, and yeah, basically that's it. I mean, everything as far as all the podcasts and stuff, content that I put out can be found on the website at HeadphonesNeil.reviews, along with links to the social media sites that I'm on as well. But that is all for this particular episode and year. Thanks for tuning in and supporting the show, and until next year.